The wealthy man. The ear-splitting screams of thunder pierced the heavens above. Lightning flashed across the night sky as heavy rain crashed down upon the poor man. The man fumbled through his pockets and found a torn scarf. He sighed sadly. This will have to do. He wrapped the scarf around his cap to shield himself from the icy droplets. The beggar coughed roughly and began to stumble down the streets of Victorian London. "Fabian! Fabian!" Mr. Hathaway angrily called down the majestic hallway. A feeble butler ran to his cry and timidly replied, Yes, sir?" Mr. Hathaway clenched his fist furiously. "Did I not order you to make the rooms ready for my guests?" Fabian looked down at the floor. I did, sir. I did 3 of the rooms you asked for." "3? I ordered you to prepare all 7 rooms," Mr. Hathaway shouted. Fabian did not dare to meet the master's deadly gaze. Yes, sir. I must have forgotten. I will get back to work immediately. I will do better next time." Mr. Hathaway slowly turned around. "If you disappoint me one more time, fool, I will make sure there will not be a next time." The butler nodded and hurried away to the kitchen. Mr. Hathaway sat down on his luxurious velvet chair. "If one more thing goes wrong tonight, He stopped. Amidst the pounding rain on the glass windows, there was a faint knocking sound. "Ah, my guests!" Mr. Hathaway brushed his hair and began his way to the door. As he calmly strolled to the threshold, he noticed the thunder becoming louder. Mr. Hathaway grasped the golden handle and opened the latch with a heavy click. He rubbed his eyes to make sure he was not seeing things. When he saw what was awaiting him, Mr. Hathaway stood there gaping at what he found. There, on his doorstep, he stared at a beggar with a torn scarf around his cap. The beggar had ripped gloves and a torn jacket. He was dirty and muddied with scratches on his arms. Mr. Hathaway approached the beggar unhappily. "Yes, what do you want, stranger?" The beggar's hands trembled with cold. "Please, sir, I apologize for troubling you at this hour, but may I seek shelter until the rain stops?" Mr. Hathaway blinked. "A filthy and wretched man such as yourself wishes to accompany me in my mansion?" Mr. Hathaway said disgustedly. The beggar stared at him in confusion and soon realized that he was not welcome. "Fabian, come here at once," Mr. Hathaway demanded. Fabian quickly came to his side and gazed upon the visitor with curiosity. "Put an end to your gawking and remove this wretched filth from my sight," Mr. Hathaway ordered and turned away from the beggar. Fabian nodded curtly and shut the door, leaving the beggar shuddering in the freezing cold. A year passed since the poor beggar was shunned away from the manor. During this time, Mr. Hathaway only became wealthier and popular with his dignified company. However, on a crisp autumn morning, the man was intrigued to find a surprise awaiting his doorstep. "Good day, Mr. Hathaway. I am Lord Arthur of Covent Garden." The young man introduced himself. Mr. Hathaway was shocked. A lord? Coming to greet him? He was not even aware of a lord named Arthur in London. Mr. Hathaway gazed at the man's fine silk coat and gold buttons. His shoes were shined and pristine with silver buckles. He must be nobility. Come in, please, you are certainly welcome. I apologize for not recognizing you, my lord." Inside, Mr. Hathaway offered the lord his best chair and his best refreshments. Soon, Mr. Hathaway realized that there was more to this visit than just a normal gathering. "Excuse me, my lord, but why have you decided to see me?" Lord Arthur placed his teacup down and smiled. Lord Arthur cleared his throat and began to explain. "You see, sir, a few weeks ago some rival merchants destroyed my family's ship and stole all of the cargo. That cargo needed to be sold, and in return the money would have provided for our merchants. Our businesses are suffering from the huge loss." Mr. Hathaway gasped. Bad luck indeed, but how does this involve me? Lord Arthur hesitated for a moment before continuing. Mr. Hathaway, we need the money to help repair the damage. However, our need for financial aid has been denied by Parliament since the cargo was not their property. May you be willing to give us financial aid? Mr. Hathaway did not hesitate and quickly realized that this would be a huge opportunity for him to gain company with the noble families. Of course, I will be happy to assist you, my lord. Lord Arthur sighed gratefully. Thank you, sir. You will be making a huge difference in London. Both men shook hands and Mr. Hathaway signed the contract. Lord Arthur bid farewell and briskly walked into the night. Lord Arthur hurried into town and entered a cheerful pub. He headed upstairs and changed out of his fine clothes and packed them away in a dirty suitcase. Another job done. Time to put these away now. I will be needing them again soon enough. Arthur laughed. He hid the suitcase behind the door and hurried to join the other men for a meal. At the manor, Mr. Hathaway felt different after the Lord visited him. He felt important. He waited patiently for the Lord's family to contact him. A whole week passed and he soon began to feel restless. Not a single letter, he sighed to himself. A few hours later, Fabian came rushing into the study. Master, master, there is something for you. It is urgent. He cried out excitedly. Mr. Hathaway leapt from his desk and opened the letter quickly after a desperate wait. However, this was not the letter he ever thought he would receive. After reading the note, Mr. Hathaway felt his heart beat faster. He felt faint and fell upon his chair. The note was from Parliament. The letter seemed to maliciously smile at him. Lord Arthur was actually a con man who used the money to export stolen goods. Since Mr. Hathaway signed the contract, he was now thought to be a part of the scandal. All that money gone. What will I do now? Mr. Hathaway whispered to himself. Suddenly, a thumping knock resounded through the house. Open up. You are under arrest. Fabian hurried to open the door. Mr. Hathaway only stayed helplessly seated. Please, I'm innocent. I was tricked, bamboozled, conned. He pleaded with the men. You may explain yourself when you are asked. Now come. Fabian watched as the men took his master away. After serving a year in prison, the con man was caught in his act and he confessed for his lies and for his scheme against Mr. Hathaway. Mr. Hathaway was released. However, life was never the same for him again. When he returned to his home, he learned the dreadful truth that his house was destroyed in order to make room for a new government project. All his remaining money was taken and used for other facilities. I have nothing, he cried. He began to wander around town looking for something, anything that could help him start a new way of living. His clothes became tattered and his fine shoes began to rot with holes. Soon, rain began to pour, as if a massive wave was being drawn upon the small town. The man shivered with cold and he felt himself growing tired. However, he continued to walk down the street as the other townspeople hurried to their homes. As Mr. Hathaway began to lose hope, a small flickering light was seen in the distance. It seemed like a big house. It is, Mr. Hathaway exclaimed. He ran to the house with all his remaining strength. He knocked on the door. A distinguished man answered. He was wearing a clean suit with refined shoes. Mr. Hathaway got down to his knees and begged for some coins. The man lifted Mr. Hathaway up on his feet. You may stay if you would like. The warmth by the fire pulled Mr. Hathaway in a warm embrace. The next morning, the man gave a pouch of coins to Mr. Hathaway. Mr. Hathaway felt his eyes brimming with tears. How could a man show such kindness? The man smiled and approached him. Because of my appearance, you judged me for a beggar. You referred to me as filth and a fool. However, when you asked me what I wanted, I could have asked for money if I really was a beggar. However, all I wanted was some hospitality. The man revealed. Mr. Hathaway dropped the pouch of coins onto the ground in disbelief. The man lingered at his face for a moment, then he closed his door. Mr. Hathaway felt an eruption of guilt, almost as if the man had plunged his fist into his chest to leave a big empty hole. This man had no extra room, yet he had given me shelter, while I had more than enough space which I denied him. I denied a gracious poor man when instead I welcomed a refined thief. Mr. Hathaway said to himself. He gathered the coins from the ground and left the money at the man's doorstep. Your kindness taught me lifetime lessons which I will never forget. A person cannot be judged by their appearance. Mr. Hathaway turned his head and continued to walk on. Your hospitality was worth millions.